Today I'm joined by Phil Moreland. Phil has 30 plus years of experience in strength and conditioning in high performance sports, coached Olympic champions, Paralympic champions. Phil has headed 4 different strength and conditioning departments in 3 different countries. Welcome, Phil.
Cheers, Christian. Thanks for having me, mate.
Phil, before we get into it, you are on to leaving high performance sports, but we get into that later. How did you get into strength and conditioning?
It's an interesting story. I guess I was a young rugby player back in the mid '80s. Got my first injury and wandered off to a local physio that was recommended to me. And I got to know this physio over a course of time, and I was kind of struggling with what I was going to do post high school and where I was going to go and what was happening. And a guy by the physio's name was Mike Dalgleish, kind of spoke to me about this career that was opening up in the US called strength and conditioning. And it was really early days in Australia, really wasn't big in Australia at all, wasn't much happening. But he felt it was going to be the next big thing. And he was like, you should think about heading off and doing, a sports studies degree or a human movement degree as it was in those days. And potentially that might be a career path that opens. So I kind of headed that way. I finished high school. I headed off and did an associate diploma first in sports studies. Got a little bit of a taste of doing some conditioning work with a local rugby league club. The university that I went to was the University of New England at the time, which is now the University of Southern Cross, which is a fairly famous organisation here in Australia from a human movement, strength and conditioning point of view. Lots of good people have come out of there. And I got a little bit of a taste of it, and I thought, this could be pretty good. Tried to pursue it a little bit, ultimately didn't really get much traction. And actually I ended up working as a recreation officer for a number of years in the hospital system in Brisbane. And then out the back of that, I kind of really didn't enjoy that. So I went and did my undergraduate degree at the University of Canberra. And I guess the real hook was getting to spend time. The AIS was then flourishing. So this was the early 90s. The AIS had been flourishing for a while. And I got to spend time in the strength and conditioning department there. Now, the department at that time was headed by a guy by the name of Harry Waddell. Harry was probably one of the big fathers of strength and conditioning here in Australia. The assistant at the time was a guy by the name of Jeff Dam. And then the scholarship coach at the time was somebody that a lot of your listeners will probably know as a guy by the name of Julian Jones. So Julian was a young scholarship coach just starting out in his career as well. And I got an opportunity to hang around those guys, and that was me kind of hooked. And then I just kept working myself in that space. Every opportunity I could get to hang out with those guys at AIS, I took. I spent 2 years in Canberra, finishing off my undergraduate degree. And then I kind of left Canberra and headed to Brisbane and was lucky enough to land a role with Queensland Cricket and the Queensland Bulls. And then it just kind of went on from there. It just, part-time contracts here, part-time contracts there. And then eventually I landed my first full-time contract in about 1999. And that took me overseas. And that was my first overseas jaunt to Brunei, of all places. And then it's just kept rolling from there, mate.
Oh, cool. You're looking back at 30 plus years of experience in the industry. We have seen trends come and go. What were trends that stayed and what were trends that were more fads, in your opinion?
Oh, yeah. Look, it's been interesting. I think that the trends for me that have stayed, and I don't know if you would call it a trend, and it probably links into my philosophy, is just good, sound, solid coaching. Doing the little things well and doing the fundamentals really, really well and not really looking for the sexy things. I guess I kind of haven't really looked for the sexy stuff in my career. I've kind of founded it on just doing those little things well. But you see things come full circle, don't you? I remember back in the day talking to guys, and a lot of the Eastern Bloc and Eastern and Soviet type calisthenics based work and body movement type work and fundamental movement type work was was all, was the big thing, and back in the 60s and 70s or 50s, 60s, and we seem to have come full circle with that again, and that type of work is at the forefront. I think the fads that we've got at the moment in and around technology, and technology really taking a lead and technology really driving it. And I think sometimes we get lost in that technology space, and we're finding coaches are quite paralyzed and not being able to do things without something flashing numbers at them or giving them a buzz when something goes right. So, I think the technology space is really taking us over now, and I'm constantly talking to coaches about coming back to our roots as coaches, and how do we fix a broken movement, and how do we change movement patterns, and how we're not relying on technology and numbers in front of us. The whole core control stuff, the Swiss ball fads, the circus acts jumping on Swiss balls, standing on Swiss balls on one leg, and all that type of stuff kind of came big in the 90s and has drifted away a little bit. I mean, there's been so many, mate, and I think what we've got to keep coming back to as coaches is that fundamental piece that we're really good at, interacting with people, using our eye to be able to observe movement, and then using our knowledge to be able to change those movement patterns and make those people better.
Yeah, I agree. Why do you think technology takes over? Why is it so appealing to people?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit to do with the type of athlete that we're working with now. We're working with an athlete that's come through an age of instant gratification, haven't we? Like, they play a video game and they get an instant piece of feedback. There seems to be stuff that's just available to them all the time and every minute of every day. And I think, that ability to see a number or to hear a noise or something along those lines on a piece of kit is exciting for them. Look, I think there's lots of uses for it, but I think we get over reliant on it. We become dependent on it. And, my argument to somebody who, for example, is using velocity-based training and they can't run a gym session without a gym aware is, what happens if that athlete's on training camp? How are we educating that athlete to be able to move that bar just as quick, or to understand what that bar feels like, rather than, just having the technology that tells him what it feels like? I think there's a number of reasons. I think some of our coaches at the moment don't really know how to coach. I don't think they really understand the pedagogy of coaching and what it means to coach. So for them, coaching is, hearing and seeing a number that goes higher, or, hearing a noise that tells them a bar's moved quicker, rather than being able to see that and feel that and understand that from an environmental point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, we shouldn't forget that technology is just one tool in the entire toolbox we have, right?
Absolutely. And I talk to coaches a lot about the coaching toolbox, that ability to reach into the toolbox at the appropriate time and pull out the appropriate tool for the right scenario. And I'm constantly reminded of, you had Kelvin on this cast, and I'm constantly reminded of a phrase that he uses all the time, that if the only tool you've got in your toolbox is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And I think, that's been a big one for me, and that's a big one that I use with young coaches. You've got to be able to have a broad depth of and a broad range of tools in your box to be able to use at the appropriate time.
Absolutely. In your life as an S&C coach, what was your darkest moment?
Probably when I lost my first job, and not understanding why I lost that first job, and trying to work out what I hadn't done, because the job I lost, the team I was working with, it was a successful season. We'd had positive results. We'd won both the trophies that were available for us to win. And I guess trying to fathom what it actually meant, was it a reflection of me doing a really bad job? Was it the coach trying to reinvigorate and reshape the environment because he'd just had his contract renewed, and so therefore he had to make something look different and feel different? Was I just not good at what I was doing? Had I missed things? there were lots of things going through my head at that point in time, but I reflect back on it and I actually think it was probably one of the best things that could actually happen to me. It made me think more about the way I do things. It forced me to probably be a lot more reflective with what I do. And I think, you know, a lot of young coaches today probably don't actually really experience that. I know here in Australia, a lot of our roles, particularly in the environment that I'm in at the moment in the state institute or in the institute networks, are government positions. So it's very hard for people to lose their jobs in government. So I'm not sure that a lot of coaches have really experienced that, or young coaches have experienced that. It put a lot of self-doubt in my mind. It questioned me. I was questioning whether I wanted to continue this. Maybe it's easier to go back into the gym world and just work with Joe Public and work in that space. But ultimately, I think it made me a better person. And ultimately, I think it helped me really focus on how I wanted to do the job going forward and what I needed to be a better person moving forward.
And how did you recover from it?
I put my focus into the conso. At that point in time, a lot of these were, you know, part-time contracts. I put my focus into the other contracts that I had. I spoke to mentors that I had at the time and friends that I had at the time that helped me steer myself in the right direction. I tried to make myself better, you know, tried to really understand what it was that caused that decision to be made, and then move myself forward from there. I think I used my network strongly at that point in time just to help me, you know, get to where I wanted to get to. And ultimately just really focused on the contracts that I had and the teams that I was working with and the individuals that I was working with to make sure that I was doing the best job that I could. And then the opportunities opened again. You know, you quickly learn that it wasn't necessarily about you. You had been doing a good job. And in this instance, it was the coach wanting to reshape the environment, and he just wanted something different and a different voice. You know, I'd been in that role for probably 3-4 years, and he just wanted something different. And I guess the other thing that it taught me is that your lifespan in contracts like that are finite. You know, they're short. You know, you've either got to start to reinvent yourself and look for ways that you're constantly evolving the environment that you're working in, and you're constantly trying to shape the environment that you're working with, or else your time is finite. You know, and I often talk to coaches about, sometimes I reckon, you know, your lifespan within an organization is about 7 years. If you can take it beyond that 7-year mark, 2 Olympic cycles, happy days. But I think that's the time when you've either got to really look to reinvigorate and reshape what you do, or it's time for you to start to maybe find a different challenge and look for a new challenge.
That's interesting. It's similar to the economy. They say there's a depression every 7 to 10 years, huh?
Yeah, it is. And I'm not sure who spoke to me about that, but, you know, a number of people, we've had those conversations. I remember when I first landed in the UK and this whole UK system was setting up, we often spoke about 2 Olympic cycles to bed in change. So, you know, whatever you did at the start of, you know, for example, when we first kicked off with the Sports Institute Northern Ireland in 2002, you know, the view was, you know, by 2010, 2012, you've probably really embedded in that change, and you've really started to shape the system to what you wanted it to shape to. And I'm a bit of a believer in that. I've seen that in a number of places where, you know, you've either got to, as I said to you before, you've either got to reshape and start to rethink about what you do and how you present what you present, or you've got to look for different challenges. And I guess if I look at the organizations as I've stepped across the time, that's probably been my timelines in those organizations is maybe 8 years or you know, or similar before I've decided I needed a new challenge or a new change, or equally I've had to reshape what I was doing in that organization to take me on a few more years.
What was your best moment as an S&C coach?
Look, there's been a number of them. You know, everybody's going to probably, And it was one of my most enjoyable moments was the gold medal in Sydney with Natalie and Kerry. I guess if I reflect back when I was exiting from my undergraduate degree and starting on this bit of a journey, you know, if you say that one of your goals is to work with one of your own groups of athletes and win a medal at a home Olympic Games, you know, that's probably everybody's biggest dream. And to actually do it, I kind of remember sitting courtside at the end of that, kind of thinking, okay, what do you do now? Like, what's next? But yeah, so that was probably one, and a big highlight. But I guess I'm not one that's always just shaped by the medal winner. You know, there's equally, I look at some of my athletes that I've worked with who have just achieved personal bests at games or have just made a games team. You know, equally for them, that was a defining moment for them or an important moment for them. But I also, you know, really enjoy seeing coaches that I've mentored and I've worked with, you know, succeed. You know, there's a young lad at the moment by the name of Dan Jefferson, who started with me in Scotland, plumber by trade, transitioned into this world of strength and conditioning. You know, he's just landed a role as the lead, you know, boxing S&C coach for Indian Boxing Federation, you know, and to be a part of that journey and help him on that journey and see him flourish on that journey to land this role is been equally as enjoyable as that gold medal moment, you know.
Really cool. What advice would you give a younger you if you could travel back in time?
If I could travel back in time and give a younger me some advice, be patient. Don't look to rush things. Enjoy the journey, because sometimes there's been moments where it hasn't been enjoyable, and I think you've just got to sit back and enjoy it, and everything happens for a reason. And I think, you know, the other big piece of advice, which I didn't really recognize in myself at the time, is value your network. You know, value the people that you meet along the way, and really, you know, foster those relationships and build those relationships. I probably didn't really learn that till quite late on in my career, how important, you know, your network is and how important those mentors are and how important those people are around you. So I guess that's probably the biggest piece of advice. And I find myself giving that advice to a lot of young coaches all the time now. You know, really spend time in fostering your network, really spend time in building those relationships and keeping those relationships strong.
You already answered the next question. What's the advice to young aspiring S&C coaches?
Oh, look, that one is big, but the one that I really find I give a lot to people is go out and experience the world. You know, don't just sit in your own little patch. Don't just be comfortable in your environment that you're in Australia or in you know, other cases, Scotland or Northern Ireland. Go and experience the world, because what you learn and what you gain from immersing yourself in a different culture, in a different place, experiencing different versions of this high performance world that we live in, strengthens you, makes you a better coach, teaches you different things. You know, my time spent working in Asia was where I learned patience. You know, I was a really impatient person, because in Australia, when you push, normally you get where you want to get to, and you know, things happen. When you try to do that in Asia, it just kind of shuts down, and people start to distance themselves from you because you become this pushy Australian or this annoying Australian. So, you know, that taught me patience. It taught me that there's different ways to approach a problem, and, you know, you might have to be quite subtle in the way you approach a problem. And I don't think I would have learned or honed some of those skills just sitting here in Australia and experiencing, you know, one sporting system. So I guess, you know, that's a big one. Experience the world, get out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself. Don't be comfortable in the space that you're in, and broaden your toolbox. Make your toolbox as big as you can, make it as rich as you can. Just because, people tell you that Olympic lifts are the be all and end all. Yep, that's one tool to put in your toolbox. Go and experience the other myriads of ways that you can go and develop force production or explosive power or whatever it might be to give you a big richness of what you can offer an athlete and what you can offer a sports program.
Yeah. You have worked as a strength and conditioning coach as well as a strength and conditioning manager. What would you say are the main differences in working between these two roles?
I think the differences are not huge. At the end of the day, I think our profession's about people. Yeah, it's about relationships, and it's about building relationships. And I guess, when I'm working within a sporting team, I'm building relationships with the coaches. I'm building relationships with the athletes. I guess when I'm working with my team as an S&C manager, I'm wanting to build those same relationships. I want to understand them, not just as coaches. I want to understand them as people. I want to know what their dreams and aspirations are. I want to know if I can help them, achieve those dreams and aspirations. I think having worked in the institute networks, I'm very cognizant of the fact that, institutes are developing grounds. We tend to develop coaches who want to go on and work with pro sport, who want to go on into those types of environments. So I think, part of the recognition as a manager is if I lose good people to better jobs, then part of me feels that I've done my job well. If I've lost a coach to a better position, if I've lost a coach to a pro sport team, and that's their aspiration and that's their dream, and we've had some role to play in that, and we've helped them get there, then I've done a good job as a manager. I've done my job to help that person progress in their career. And I think that's the differences, but the similarities. I'm trying to help athletes progress in their career. And I think sometimes as coaches, we don't recognize the point in time to let an athlete go. We don't recognize a point in time when we've done what our role has been to do at that point in their journey. And it's okay to let that person go and move on. And I think that's the bit that I also want to try and bring into developing my staff. It's okay to let them go. Do I want to keep good people? Absolutely. I want to keep good people. But I also recognize that sometimes you're going to lose good people, and you want to help them transition if that's what they want to do and how they move on. Yeah. It's a similar but different, type thought process, I think. Yeah.
And when you hired assistant S&C coaches or S&C coaches, what qualities are you looking for?
Well, first and foremost, I'm looking for good people. That's the piece that I want. I want first and foremost. I want good people. I want people that have strong values. I want people that have, good moral compasses. I want people that are there for the right reasons. They're not there, they're not just there for the money, or they're not just there for the badge or the tracksuit or whatever we want to say. They're there because they want to help people and they want to work with people. So first and foremost, good people. Secondly, I want people that have a really good ability to think broadly. It's not just about the sets and reps, and we've heard people say this a lot. I want people that can really get under the bonnet of a sport, that can think strategically about where this sport is going or the athlete's going or how they're going to move an athlete forward. I don't want somebody that can just mindlessly write down some exercises and some sets and reps on a piece of paper. I want people that can really, really get under the bonnet of the sport and really think about a sport. And I want people that can coach. I want people that have a broad coaching toolbox. I want people that can handle pressure situations. And I think remembering listening to your podcast with Kelvin, I think he told you about our interview processes that we've run and how we really challenge them and put them in really uncomfortable situations. Because I think if you put them in challenging situations, you see the true them. You see the real them in that moment of time. You see whether they can anchor on to a set of principles and values and ways of working that will help them get out of that situation, or whether they're robots and they're reliant on that ability to just put exercises down on paper. And I guess they're the types of qualities that I'm really looking for. I was actually talking with Mitch Pemberton the other night. We were doing a presentation to a group of UC candidates, and his reflection on the interview process that he went through in Scotland. And he actually said, he actually found that was one of the most challenging interviews that he ever went through. But he actually also recognised it was probably the best interview that he'd ever been through. So I like to think that that's a good thing if we're giving him that type of experience as well.
He came to visit us, Mitch. He was with us a few days to shadow me plus another few coaches.
Yeah. Really, really good operator, and really funny story. The interview process that we ran at the time, because we completely restructured the department in Scotland, we went through like a 3-stage approach. So the first stage was just a presentation. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We gave them a sport that we wanted them to present on to see if they could think about things. And Mitch actually had a nightmare. His presentation was not good, and the other members of the interview panel actually wanted to finish it then and there. That was like stage 1, and I'm like, nah, there's something there. And that's the other thing. I think you've got to, as a manager, that there's something there that you want to explore, or something there that intrigues you. And we moved him on to the second process. I made a bit of a captain's call on that one. And we moved him on to the second process, and he interviewed better. But then as part of the interview process, if you can imagine, they're sitting there in their suit and tie. They've just been grilled by a 3 or a 4-member panel. We thank them very much for their time. And then it's kind of, but there's one more thing. I'd like you to come with me. And we take them outside, and there's a group of athletes there, and we get them to run a warm up, with a very specific outcome. You've got this group of team sport athletes. They're about to do a max velocity session. Oh, you've got 15 minutes to warm them up. Go. And Mitch at the time really anchored on to some really strong coaching principles, and was able to just deliver a really good quality warm up and coach it and engage the athletes and move the athletes and motivate the athletes. And we'd seen other people that had presented well, had interviewed exceptionally well, and we put them in that situation. And they were, you're getting the questions like, well, can I go get changed? No. Or what, I've got to do it in my suit and tie? Yeah. They just couldn't grasp the situation, and they just couldn't work in that situation. It was really foreign for them and really difficult for them. So, kudos to him. And I guess that's the other thing is, what you get at interview is sometimes not what you get when you put them into those types of environments. And that's why I think that environmental piece is just so important.
Yeah, cool. You have headed S&C departments in 3 different countries and 2 different continents. What would you say are the biggest challenges when working with different cultural backgrounds?
They're numerous. They're broad. But ultimately really rewarding, because they teach you a lot about yourself, and they teach you how to be a different person. I mean, I think my very first experience in 1999, when I flew out of here and landed in Brunei and started to work in that environment, was one of, a Muslim culture. Never experienced that before in my life. Lots of talk before we arrived there about this thing called Ramadan and what it might mean and how it would challenge us. Lots of talk about the sensitivities around the culture and what we needed to not do and what we could do, and things that were valued and things that were not valued, and things that were deemed offensive and things that were not offensive, and trying to bring all of these types of things into your coaching practice. You made lots of mistakes. You learned lots about yourself. You learn how to change your practice to manipulate the situation. So if we take Ramadan, for example, ultimately, fast from, sun up to sunset, break the fast. We had coaching sessions running at 11 o'clock at night. we had athletes in the gym at 11 o'clock through to, 2 to 1, 2 in the morning. So we had to completely change the way we operated and we worked and we delivered our sessions, understanding that certain positions, I remember one of my positions just doing, or one of my sessions with a group of athletes, just simply doing, floor-based work. And a couple of those athletes found that really uncomfortable and not appropriate. And I couldn't understand why. And it was it was in relationship to the viewing of being put into a position like a dog, and that was really disrespectful. And I guess those types of things I really struggled to understand, but ultimately I think I learned a lot from that, and it changed the way that I did that. I think then stepping out of Asia and stepping into Europe while they're, working in Scotland and Northern Ireland while they're parts of Great Britain, they're two really different countries with two really different ways of operating and working. You've got a Scottish system who's very heavily aligned with the GB system, yet every 4 years in the Commonwealth Games is an independent country who really dislikes the English. And, you've got all those cultural sensitivities that kind of go on. And then you go to Northern Ireland, where you've got a north, south, east, west dimension. So you've got some athletes representing Great Britain and the UK, and you've got other athletes who are representing the Republic of Ireland. And how do you manage those types of situations in terms of funding coming from one part of the United Kingdom, which is ultimately funding athletes that are competing for Ireland? So there was all those types of sensitivities that we had to manage and work with. And I think, again, the richness in the learning there is really important. And then I think, ultimately in a number of the countries that I've kind of worked in, strength and conditioning, when I arrived there, was really in its infancy. It wasn't a profession. When I arrived in Northern Ireland, there were 2 S&C coaches in the country. It was myself and a guy by the name of Phil Moreland, who was with Ulster Rugby. And so how do you create an ethos? How do you create a viable profession and pathway out of that as well? And I think that was the big piece that we really pushed early on, is how do we actually get a career path established in Northern Ireland for strength and conditioning coaches. And now if you look around the world, between the north and the south in Ireland, and there were some good people in the south as well pushing the same type of things. There's been some amazing S&C coaches that have come out of the island of Ireland in recent times. So that's something that's, again, you look back and go, well, if you had a little part to do with that, then that's a pretty amazing thing to do.
Really cool. What's your coaching philosophy?
My coaching philosophy is it's ever evolving, as I think every philosophy should be. I think you should be constantly questioning and challenging the way that you do things. But I think over the time, I'm very, very rooted in the athlete as an individual. So how do I work with that individual in front of me, and then using those strategic thought processes that I spoke about before to really understand what that athlete needs. I guess again, taking some guidance from Kelvin, who's been a fairly big influencer on me. I ask 3 key questions when I first start working with an athlete. And the first question I want to know is, where are they now? Where are they going to? And then what's my role at this point in time of their journey? So if I can answer those 3 questions and have a really good understanding of that really helps me shape the way that I work with that athlete. But my philosophy is really founded in getting the fundamentals right, getting the basics in place. It's not about the sexy stuff. It's about making sure that the athlete, is treated as an individual, can move well, and has all of the tools that they need, to handle whatever's going to be kind of put at them or thrown at them, regardless of where they're going on their journey and regardless of where they are in their journey. I'm not going to stand here and say, my philosophy is around Olympic lifts and, explosive power development. It's not about that. It's really about developing that individual person that sits in front of me, and what is it that I need to do to make that individual better, not from just a coaching point of view or a strength or a power or a movement point of view or a conditioning point of view, but make that person better. I think is really important.
Yeah. And when you ask these 3 questions, do you involve the athlete in that, or you have it in your head?
No, athlete is critical. Coach is critical. You know, depending on the age of the athlete, mum and dad might be critical. I think, you know, you've got to use all of the resources that sit around that athlete to understand, you know, those questions, and to be able to check and challenge on those questions as well. You know, the big one is understanding that destination. What are their aspirations? What are their dreams? What are their goals? You know, some are on the destination to the elite, some are on the destination to somewhere else, but you might not know that at that particular time. Their destination still might be the elite. So therefore, let's make sure we're giving them those appropriate tools and those appropriate skills. If they deviate onto a different journey at a later stage, so be it. Then check, adjust, shift. You know, so I think involving the athlete is really, really important and really critical. And I think the relationship that you then build with the coach is really important as well. And I think not only just the coach, I think, you know, if we're talking the performance world that we live, the relationships of all the performance team working together is really, really important. You know, I think it kind of builds into another area that I'm really fascinated about is this area of integration and what we think is integration and what we call integration. I would challenge that a lot of what we call integration is really coordination, that we're not really integrated. I know what you're doing and you know what I'm doing, and we know what the physio is doing, but are we actually integrated and working together on all of that? Or is it just my bit finishes and your bit starts, and your bit finishes and the physio's bit starts? You know, I see a lot of that being described as integration, and it's not. So that relationship piece is really important as well to make sure we're steering that athlete in the right direction.
What are your core values?
Honesty. You know, I think that's got to be my number one value. What you see is what you get. You know, I will always be upfront and honest, whether I'm working with an athlete, whether it's my staff, you know, whoever it might be. I think that's a really, really important value to me. I want to make sure that I give honesty and I expect honesty in return. And that's a really important thing with my staff as well. I really value honesty in my staff, and I really value from the honesty from the athlete as well. Tell me if it's not working. Tell me if I'm not doing a good job. Tell me if you've got challenges that we're not meeting. You know, I think that honesty piece is really, really important. And then that goes kind of hand in hand with trust, doesn't it? You know, I think, you know, honesty and trust are two really important pieces. I want to build trust in my athletes. I want, you know, I had a really, it's a really hard time at the moment when you know that you're moving on and you're coming to the end of working with a group of athletes, and you can see that they're quite upset that you're going, and you're still trying to support them, and you're just having conversations with them about how they're feeling about all this and all of that. And, you know, when one of them throws to you, well, you're the first S&C coach I've trusted, and the first S&C coach I've trusted to take me where I know I want to go to, you know, that's really important for me. And I think, you know, if I'm equally trusting of them, that they're going to do the work that I ask of them, I think it starts to build a bit of a two-way street. I would say that they're probably my two biggest core values. They're the two things that are most important to me.
Which person has influenced you most and why?
There's been a lot. There's been a lot at different stages. You know, I spoke about Harry Wardell really early on. Kind of showed me what this profession could be about. kind of showed me the pathway that you could travel, that this was viable. I spoke very early on about Julian. He was a scholarship coach who has become a really good friend, but has equally become a mentor as well, and someone that has influenced and shaped my career and has given me the opportunities to talk about different things at different stages. My first boss at the Sports Institute, Northern Ireland, a gentleman by the name of Ronnie Smith, he gave me the belief, or he empowered me. I arrived at the Sports Institute Northern Ireland as just an S&C coach. There was no such thing as a head of S&C or anything like that, but it fast became apparent that I couldn't do this by myself. I needed to have holidays, so I needed staff, and I needed to develop interns, and he kind of empowered me to explore this leadership and this management piece, and eventually supported me in the creation of a head of S&C role, which I kind of fell into. So I'm forever and grateful to him for trusting in me in that leadership space and helping me hone and foster those leadership abilities. And then you come to someone like Kelvin, and I've referenced Kelvin a lot tonight, and I guess there are a lot of S&C coaches in Australia that owe a lot to Kelvin, who's developed a lot of us, who has set a lot of us on our pathways and our journeys, who we talk to him quite a lot. We listen to him quite a lot. He brings a lot of wisdom and challenges us a lot as well. He makes us question what we do. He makes us be better people. And, I guess his influence really started to shift and change me in the early 2000s when I was still in the UK, and he'd moved back to the UK, and we kind of reconnected. And, he started to challenge me away from that Olympic lifting guy into this, let's start to look at the athlete as a whole person. Let's start to look at the athlete more than just how much force they can produce or how much they can lift or the reps and sets on a page. He really started to steer me into looking at this athlete in a different way, and how I work with athletes in a different way. So, I'm not going to say that there's one person, and I think, the coming back to the younger me, I think that would be the thing that I'd say to the younger me is, that network piece and learning that, but also for young coaches today to recognize it's not that one magic bullet person. There's going to be different people along your journey that are going to give you different bits and pieces. Nat and Kerry taught me a lot. They gave me an opportunity to do something really amazing and really special. And that journey that we had, they put me into places where I drew on skill sets that I didn't have or didn't know that I had, forced me to look at things differently, forced me to do things and challenge myself in ways that I hadn't been challenged. So I think there's going to be people that will do things and help you and guide you all the way along your journey. And I think it's important to recognize when those people appear and then what you can get from those people.
Yeah. And that also probably comes back to the life cycle that you mentioned earlier of 7 years that, people come in, spend a lot of time with these people, and then you move on, they move on, and
absolutely. But you find there are constants, Kelvin's been a bit of a constant for me. In fact, my very first meeting with Kelvin, I remember it vividly, and I tell this story when I introduce him when he presents, was, politely being told to go away, and when you'd done something with your career, come back and talk to me. As a really young coach in 1987, when he was still there was 87 or 88, I can't remember what year it was around then, maybe 89, when he was still at the Brisbane Broncos, as their performance director there. So again, even though that might seem really harsh and that might seem really challenging, it was actually, again, another light bulb moment to say, well, I can't just expect these people to bend over backwards and just hand me stuff on a platter. I do have to go and work for this. I do have to go and find things myself. But equally, it also taught me a bit of a lesson, and I probably find that I'm a little bit more open to younger coaches when they come asking of my advice or they come asking to look for me, because, you know, there are a number of experiences early on in my career where I had that pushback. No, go away. I don't want to know you. When you've done something, come back to me and we'll talk. Whereas I want to probably foster those younger kids these days and give them those opportunities that I probably didn't get.
Yeah, that is exactly what I have at times with some of my colleagues or younger coaches that come in, right? I see the younger Christian and I think, like, you know, you would have loved to have someone who helped you. So
yeah,
I do enjoy that.
Yeah.
Okay, dealing with individuals. As an S&C coach, we deal with individuals and their expectations. Sometimes the expectations of the individuals, the athletes, are very different from what we think should be done. How do you influence change?
Oh, a wise man once told me that, you know, if you want to bring somebody along on a journey, then you've got to make sure that you're creating a coherent, concurrent argument. You know, you've got to make sure that you're really coherent in what you're wanting to do, that you've got, you know, a good, strong base to be able to put your views and your thought processes forward. But ultimately, for me, it's about investing time really early on to develop that relationship. You know, I think it's the time invested in developing the relationship with the individuals, be it a coach, be it an athlete, be it another service provider, that allows you to have those hard and difficult conversations. I think we've got to be comfortable to have those hard and difficult conversations, but it's really difficult to do that if your relationship's not strong and if your relationship's not good. You know, and I can reflect on times where, you know, I've been working with an athlete and the relationship probably hasn't been what it needed to be, or it's been, you know, we come back to that cycle. It's been a long time and you've been working with that athlete for a long time, and, you know, they very much see that they want to go a different way. You want to keep going the way that you're going. The relationship's starting to break down a little bit. You're not really in a place to have that honest conversation. And I think you've got to be able to recognize that. And I'll come back to that bit before, you know, where that's maybe the recognition point in time to say, hey, you know what? I actually think for both of us, it's time. It's time to go somewhere else. It's time to do something else. It's time for you to experience something different. And I think sometimes as coaches, we're fearful of that, where we think that makes us look bad, or we think that, you know, that makes our reputation poor. But I actually think that's a sign that you're very comfortable with what you do, and that you're a very mature coach, and you know, you've got good reflective pieces, and you're very self-aware of what it is that you're doing and how you're doing things. I think, you know, when you're having those conversations with the coach, it's really about getting yourself into their space, understanding, you know, if it's the coach, being able to talk in that sports language, being able to talk to, you know, being able to pose questions that allows them to start to think about it. I think we get lost sometimes really trying to force our opinions on the people, and really trying to force our way of doing something onto athletes and coaches. And I think we've got to be a lot better at bringing them along with us. You know, I always, when I'm working with coaches and I want to take them on a different journey, I ask a lot of questions. You know, what if we could do this? What do you think? What if this could happen that would allow, you know, your athletes to show up the next morning in a better recovered way? What if we thought about training in this way? How would that help you? You know, I really try to put it into that type of framework and into that approach, rather than coming in and going, well, I think what you're doing is really bad and we're going to change training to look like this, or, you know, the way you're doing that exercise is not great and we're going to do it this way. I think it's taking them on that journey with you and thinking about the language that you use, and making sure that relationship is really strong, that if it does get a little bit challenging, then you can have an honest conversation. Yeah.
And now we move on to coaches and support staff. In a team of coaches and support staff, everyone is wearing his own hat. So how do you deal with conflict when different courses of actions are proposed?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I come back to the example that we used before about this coordination versus integration, and I think what we've it's a broken record. It's the relationship piece all over again, isn't it? How do I foster those relationships? How do I spend time to understand where the coach is coming from? How do I spend time to really understand the sport so that I can talk to the coach, in that space? How do I build the relationship with the physio that we can have challenging and tough conversations, but equally we can have vibrant and really positive conversations. The silo type thing, I always struggle with it. And I think the silos happen when the sport program that you're working with doesn't have a real strategic vision. Yeah. So nobody around the table really knows where we're going. So that allows every individual around the table to form their own destination, So I come back to I think I mentioned it really early on about being able to get that strategic picture for that sport, anchor around a real strategic vision and a real strategic direction, which then allows you to anchor around really strong objectives. And if you've got really strong objectives, then the service providers can, you can anchor onto those objectives, and there becomes the commonality that you're working towards. And my history and where I see performance teams have gone bad or relationships have gone bad is there hasn't been the time invested in developing that. And so, again, the physio thinks, well, I'm going to do this because that's the most important thing to me. The S&C coach is the same. Well, I've got to get them really strong, so I'm going to go off and do this. The coach is really just interested in what they're doing in the pitch or in the pool or wherever that might be. And we've lost sight of how do I make this athlete better? If we come back to how do I make this athlete better, or how do I make this team better, or how do I close this gap for this athlete to this world champion, all of a sudden we can start to pull that team in towards that set of objectives and that strategic vision. And I think that's the bit that we've got to get better at, and we've got to do a lot better.
It's an evergreen thing, right? That's what we really have to hone into, of working together and getting the athlete better. Actually,
yeah.
Athlete-centered, coaches-driven, right? But so often it just doesn't happen. That's the way it should
happen. I mean, the athlete-driven, the athlete-centered, coach-driven. The other one I like is athlete-centered, coach-supported. Because I think there's very different ways to describe it. But it's making sure that the athlete is at the heart of whatever we do.
Yeah.
And it's making that athlete better.
I think what you're referring to, from the way I see it, I think it depends also a little bit of the stage of the athlete in his or her career, right? So for a younger athlete, it's developmental athletes, probably more coaches driven. For older, more senior athletes are probably more coach supported or facilitated even.
Yeah. Oh, look, I agree. I mean, I look at, I guess I had the privilege of working with Nat Cook across 5 Olympic cycles, and in various guises, sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time from afar, sometimes in just a little consultancy piece and then step out. And I look at how my coaching practice and relationship changed over those years. And I think it was very much that. Very early on, it was coach directed. I'm really going to direct what goes on here because I know best. That's what I thought. To, the last London cycle, where it was very much a facilitated approach, where we were working closely together. She knew her body, just as well, if not better than me, and her input and her feedback and her, influence on shaping the program was really important to get us to that final end goal of getting her to London. So I think that's a really good example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah. How does a typical day in the life of an S&C manager looks like?
It's still got a lot of coaching in it. Obviously, I'm still coaching in programs, which is really important. So there's still all of those things around, you know, program review, program analysis. You know, there's those program meetings that happen with coaches, physios, and all that type of stuff. But then you step onto the other side, and then there's a lot of stuff that's around the day-to-day operation and management of the facility, the catching up with your staff, you know, both formally and informally. And I'm a really big believer of the informal, you know, dropping by the desk to have a conversation, going out onto the gym floor and having a conversation with them on the gym floor. You know, those informal interactions, I think, are more important than the formal interactions. It's where you can have good conversations about where they're at, how they're going, how's things going in that program, how things going with you, and, you know, with these sports. You know, you can have those really good interactions, and they're the interactions that I really enjoy. But then you step into this higher management space, the interaction with senior management, the interaction with, you know, chief executives, the interaction with high performance managers who are managing multiple sports programs, you know, the interaction as a head of discipline group where, you know, you're sitting around a table with, you know, heads of performance medicine, heads of biomechanics, and looking at the, you know, the performance operation structures of an organization and you know, the way you're implementing aspects of the organization's business plan. So how you're bringing that business plan and then you're articulating it down to the operational aspects of your department, how you're trying to create, you know, what we spoke about before in core values. What's our vision? What's our mission? What are our values as a department? How do we start to bring ourselves together as a team? How do I foster those things on a day-to-day basis within the group? You know, there's all those really rich things that go on as well in the day that you're constantly tapping in little bits and pieces. And then, you know, when all of that stuff starts getting too much, you can step out on the gym floor and go coach some athletes, and your world becomes, you know, a little bit back to what you wanted to do when you first stepped into this world of strength and conditioning. And then that 2-hour gym block finishes, and then you step back into that corporate business type space, which is an interesting one, and it's challenging, and I've really enjoyed it. But equally, you know, you go back to that young you, they're all the things that you never got taught at uni. They're all the things that, you know, you never got exposed to at uni. No one at uni said one day you'll be a head of a department of 12 people and you'll have to do all this type of stuff. So you're really learning all this stuff on the fly as you go, and developing those skill sets, you know, pretty much in isolation.
How do you design a training program?
Well, I come back to that first piece. You know, those 3 questions are really important to me. The destination, really understand where we're going. You know, coming back to then where are they now? So that involves, you know, the assessment pieces, the understanding, you know, all of those aspects of it. What's my role now? What am I trying to achieve now? What do I need to do now? You know, I'll roll out another Calvinism. It's that balance of what you'd like to do and what you must do. So what must I do at this particular point in time with this athlete? Understanding, you know, the strategic piece of the program. You know, where's this whole sport program going? What do I need to understand about this sport? What do I need to understand about this sport that applies to that individual sitting in front of me? When I kind of know all that, then I can start to think about the sets, the reps, the, you know, the periodization, the, you know, how it all looks and how it all starts to come together. And I think that's the process that I really work through. I want to really understand what it is that I'm doing. I want to really understand where I'm going. And then I can start to make decisions about what needs to be put in place to get that athlete there, you know. So yeah, it's not starting at an exercise place. It's not starting at a training drills place. It's not starting at a physical quality space. All of those things come later once I've got a better understanding of the individual in front of me, and the bigger picture piece I think is really important. You know, are we 1 year out? Are we 2 years out? Are we at the start of a cycle? All of those types of things will influence where I'm at. Are we 1 year out and this athlete's just come to you, rightio, well, what's the biggest bang for buck that I can get in the next 12 months that's gonna achieve the outcome that this athlete's looking for? And I think there's lots of variables that we need to make sure that we tick off and we look at and we think about before we sit down with a piece of paper or, you know, VCP or Team Builder or whatever it is we use and start pumping exercises into a spreadsheet and reps and sets into a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Do you want to nominate someone to be interviewed?
Nominate someone to be interviewed? Yeah, I would love to. I think, you know, there's a whole raft of people that I think would be great to do this. And I'm going to throw out a guy by the name of Dave Lucini. Dave is head of strength and conditioning at Sports Institute Northern Ireland. I'm sure you're aware of him. But he's had a really interesting journey as well. I think he's a really, you know, really good coach. He's a really good person. You know, he's been a strong colleague of mine over the years, and I think, you know, he's navigated lots of different environments. You know, he was sports science coordinator for UK Sport in the very early days of UK Sport. He went on to be the Hockeyroos and the Kookaburras head of strength and conditioning for a number of years, and then he stepped back into a role of head of department in Sports Institute Northern Ireland, as well as some time in pro rugby. So he'd be an interesting person for you to have a chat to, I think.
Really cool. What's going on in the life of Phil Moreland at this moment in time? Exciting things ahead, huh?
Exciting things ahead. I have 4 days left at the New South Wales Institute of Sport. And then next week, I start as Senior Sports Science Manager for Human Performance and Safety with the Royal Australian Air Force, which is going to be a challenging shift, an exciting shift. It's definitely something that's taking me out of my comfort zone. It's definitely something that is exciting me a lot about what the future holds with that role. How do I take this skill set and this stuff that I've done in high performance sport over a great number of years and apply it to a different performance environment, with different outcomes and different needs and ultimately different consequences if things don't work, to, you know, a big organization with an Australia-wide remit that's got multiple layers and multiple levels of performance. We're talking, you know, performance in its guise as a fast jet pilot to its performance in its guise as a clerk or a chef or something along those lines. Because, you know, equally, you know, for this machine to work, all of those aspects have to perform and perform well. So I think there's a broader performance spectrum now. It's not just about putting an athlete on a podium. You know, it's how do I help get a recruit out of basic training into a place that allows them to progress on to become a pilot? How do I get a recruit come out of basic training to transition into a different job? So it's going to be really exciting to see how I apply that skill set and how I make that work. So yeah, I'll let you know maybe in 6 or 12 months time, mate, if we do this again, how it's gone.
I was about to propose I talk to you in 2 years and then see how it goes, but we can do it in 1 year as well.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years might be it. I might be back in sport in 2 years, but I don't think so. I think the timing's right. I think the exciting thing is potentially it also gives me a little bit of time back with my family. You know, we all know the sacrifices that we make in performance sport, and sometimes our families are the ones that bear the brunt of those sacrifices that we make. So I think, you know, this is going to be a good opportunity to get some time back and to invest some time in that space as well, which is going to be really fun. Really
cool. Where can people find you?
They're not going to find me on Twitter. They're not going to find me in any of those spaces. I'm not a big social media person. I am on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn and touch base with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty old school, so that's why you won't find me in any of those social media spaces. I honestly couldn't even tell you how to operate Twitter or do anything in that space, so I'm not going to be there. But yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best way to touch base, and as I said, more than happy for people to touch base with me and reach out, and I'm happy to have conversations with people however and whenever.
Really cool. First and foremost, thanks for your time. Secondly, all the best with your new role, and we speak soon.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.